So let's study the differences between RBC, that is red blood cells, and WBC, that is white blood cells. So the first point under RBC is, so red blood cells are also called erythrocytes, and for white blood cells are called leukocytes. Now leukocytes can be spelled with a C or it can be spelled with a K, both are same. So white blood cells are called leukocytes and red blood cells are called erythrocytes. Now let's move on to the second point. So RBCs are shaped as biconcave discs, and for WBC these have an irregular shape. Now the third point under RBC is, so the size of an RBC varies from 6 to 8 micrometer in diameter, and for WBC the size of the WBC varies from 12 to 17 micrometers in diameter. Now let's move on to the fourth point. So the lifespan of a RBC is about 120 days, and for WBC, so the lifespan of a WBC is around 12 to 20 days, after which they are destroyed in the lymphatic system. Now let's move on to the fifth point. So red blood cells do not have a nucleus on maturity. On the other hand, white blood cells are characterized by the presence of a large central nucleus. Now let's move on to the sixth point. So due to the presence of hemoglobin, these cells appear red in color, and for white blood cells, these cells are colorless as they do not have any pigment. Now let's move on to the next point. So only one type of RBC exists, and for WBC, so different types of WBCs are found in the blood, such as neutrophils, B lymphocytes, T lymphocytes, monocytes, basophils and eosinophils. Now let's move on to the eighth point. So RBCs help in the transport of respiratory gases to different parts of the human body. On the other hand, WBCs help in producing antibodies to fight against diseases causing microbes. So now let's move on to the ninth point. So RBCs are produced in the red bone marrow, while WBCs are produced in the red bone marrow, lymph nodes and spleen, etc. So the 10th point says that the components of the red blood cells are hemoglobin, and for white blood cells, so the components of white blood cells are antibodies with the presence of MHC, which is measured histocompatibility complex antigen cell markers. Now let's move on to the 11th point. So RBCs make up around 36 to 50% of the human blood, and for WBC they make up around 1% of the human blood. Now let's move on to the next point. So the concentration of RBC in the blood is 5 million per millimeter cube, and for WBC, so the concentration of WBC is 7,000 to 8,000 per millimeter cube of blood. Now the 13th point, the process of formation of RBC is known as erythropoiesis, while the formation of WBC, the process of formation of WBC is known as leukopoiesis. So RBCs moves between the cardiovascular systems, while WBCs move between the cardiovascular and the lymphatic systems. Let's move on to the next point. So low count of RBC in the blood results in anemia, while low count of WBCs results in leukopenia. Now let's look into a diagram of RBC. So this is the image of the RBCs. You can see that they are biconcave disc like structured, and for WBC, so this is the image of WBC. You can clearly see that WBCs do not have a definite shape, they are irregular shaped. So these were the differences between RBC and WBC. These were the differences between red blood cells and white blood cells. Thank you.